Hello and welcome to Transplants Take on Sport. My name's Lewis Daniels and today I'm joined by Shaun Ruck, a two-time kidney transplant recipient and manager of the Wales Transplant Football Team. We chat about the origins of the Wales Transplant Football Team, how Shaun became a team manager, their recent return to training, greatest sporting achievements and much, much more. Shaun also opens up about his lifelong kidney problems, both his kidney transplants, and picking himself up after setbacks. As I say in the podcast, Shaun is a real role model, so I hope you take something from our chat, just like I did. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you press subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to follow the podcast on social media, all the links will be in the show notes. Shaun Ruck, welcome to Transplants Take on Sport.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on, and a football one today, which is, I think by the time this goes out, the Euros will have finished, but the football theme continues. You are the manager of the Wales Transplant Football Team, and you're actually recording this chat from a dialysis unit where you are a patient advocate, which is, I think, is great. We'll come straight onto the Wales football team to start with. When was the team first set up?
So the team actually was set up towards the transplant games that was held in Newport in 2019. That became official, the official Team Trawsblaniad Cymru. But the team itself had been working together for roughly 4.5, nearly 5 years. We put a youth project together where we gave young adults the opportunity to do football training. So I was working closely with the youth worker from Cardiff and Vale, Shaun Thomas, and it was something that developed from there. We'd been doing the training for so long, but we hadn't ever actually had the opportunity to officially put a team together and get them to have the opportunity to play. So actually it was the transplant games where they actually had their first kind of taster of playing a proper football game.
And were you involved from those 4 or 5 years beforehand?
Yes, yeah. So I was a patient advocate for Kidney Wales charity. I was with them for 4.5 years. So it was through doing my job, and it was actually their youth project that put on various workshops and anything really to help young people with their mental health and get involved in activities outside of their renal condition. So yeah, it was actually myself and Shaun Thomas that launched the training. So I've been with it from the very beginning and been able to see the lads just being able to have that camaraderie that you get with football in general and being one of the lads, so to speak. And that was lovely to see, because it meant that when they came to training, it was no kind of feeling of you're a patient or you're different to anyone else. It was a very relaxed environment. And we also were able to provide the flexibility that you could, whatever kind of ability that you had, you were able to take part. And obviously that for us was a massive priority, so we made it feel a safe and comfortable environment. And just gave the flexibility to everyone to be able to do as much or as little as what they could do.
And that's the main thing. People with transplants playing sport, I know from my own experience, just wanted to get back involved once you've had the transplant and just
Absolutely.
be there again.
Yeah, exactly that. It is just actually providing a place where you have the opportunity to get back involved. Because I think probably, like you may know yourself, is when you have a chronic illness, sometimes you feel that you can't match the ability that is expected of your peers. So through no fault of your own, it's kind of your mentality kind of plays tricks on you and makes you take that step back and not get involved and not compete. So obviously by doing this football training and other sports that we've done, it was actually showing the patients that they are capable and actually, providing the opportunity to get their fitness and stamina back up so that if they felt that they also wanted to compete and go and play for local teams or go elsewhere and try other sports, we were just kind of providing that confidence to be able to go and do that.
And you mentioned that there's various abilities in there with the different players. What's the standard like overall?
Do you know what? The standard is phenomenal because I think what happens again when you've got that camaraderie and you're playing with peers that you know, friendships that you build, everybody pushes everyone. So everyone's always pushing them further than they expect to be able to do. And the standard of players that we've got throughout the whole team is absolutely phenomenal. If you're able to actually come to our training, which would be amazing if you could do that, one day in the future, you would look at the football training and you would think that you were just watching a local league. You were watching just general group of lads doing a normal training, ready for a game. It really doesn't look any different at all.
And you were there since the start of the team before it became the Wales Transplant Football Team.
Mhm.
Did you see sort of an increase in demand or a growth that coincided with Wales at the Euros in 2016?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like as soon as we started it, I mean, like when we first started it, we only ever had about maybe 4 to maybe 8, 9 lads attend the training. So it was very, 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 very small. And it wasn't actually until we linked up with Owain Shakespeare, who is a liver transplant patient, who got in contact with myself and Shaun. He had created a local team and he was really keen to get transplanted patients in that team. And we thought, well, this is fantastic because if we align this with the training that we're doing, we're also providing another experience, which we really wanted. And as soon as we did that, our numbers massively grew almost overnight. So where we had a maximum of 8 transplant players and dialysis players training on the weekends, we then went up to 10 to 15 really, really quickly. And they really enjoyed, obviously, being able to interact with players that were non-transplanted players. So they also then had that situation of, right, I'm competing now with normal people. I'm training with lads that aren't chronically ill. So again, it's pushing them an even step further, which was absolutely great for the boys. And I think that's why we've got the kind of the abilities that we have now and the kind of growth that we've got now because they've had that experience. They actually know that a chronic illness doesn't have to stop them. They can compete at any level that they put their mindset to.
And it's so good to hear as well. So, are you competing? I know you competed at the 2019 British Transplant Games. Are you
Mhm.
competing in sort of local and national leagues as well?
So no, so the Transplant Games was our first kind of major tournament that we ever did. We have talked about looking to compete in other leagues, and I think that will come. I think what the difficulty that we've had is the pandemic has obviously knocked us back nearly 2 years.
Absolutely.
So where we absolutely flew in the Transplant Games and had amazing success, that was kind of the stepping stone for us to go to the next level and say, okay, let's see if we can join a league and compete on that level. And then obviously the pandemic hit and it's just knocked us back. So we're now in the situation whereby we've only just started training up again, obviously having to be very aware that the pandemic is still there. So we've got to make sure that the boys are safe, being chronically ill and being immunosuppressed. We've got to make sure that we put their safety first. And then hopefully, as time builds, we will get back to where we were and actually get to show off the abilities of what Welsh players have to offer.
I think I always forget that 2019 seems so long ago now.
Oh, doesn't
But
it?
I was just thinking about it there when you answered 2019 British Transplant Games
Mm,
in what would have been I just had my transplant, so July August. There's only what 6, 7, 8 months until the pandemic hit, so you've not had that much time as sort of the official team training
no.
together, really.
No, no, not at all. And even when we went to the transplant games, we didn't have, I suppose, a select 11 or a select 15. We didn't decide on who was playing where. It wasn't a solid format for the team. We basically our goal for Newport was to basically include every person that was able to go. So we made sure that all of the lads that had been to either all of the trainings or only able to come to a select few, we gathered them all together and said, listen, you are all going to represent, you're all going to have your time on the field, and we're all going to just see what we can kind of do with what we've done over the kind of 4 years. And we didn't have any expectations. We just literally wanted to be able to say that we were able to represent the games in Newport for 2019. The games hadn't been back in Wales since something like 1996. And Wales hadn't really had a massive cohort of patients going to the games since that time, really. So it was just about being a representation of what Wales can kind of show and put on the table. And so everyone got the opportunity. So we didn't have the select 11, everyone got to have a game. And to think that we were able to come second out of that was absolutely huge, absolutely phenomenal. I and the rest of the team managers could not have been any prouder of what every person did on that field on that day. They just worked so well together. They were so really good as well with the fact that we wanted everybody to play, with the abilities that they had, because obviously the further you get up the competition, you're thinking, right, well, I want to win this, so let's look at putting our best boys out there so we can actually come home with a gold. And we're like, no, whatever level we get to, whatever position we come, let everybody have the opportunity to say that they were a part of the team. And that for me was great, because every lad respected that and everyone just pushed everybody forward, and it was phenomenal. It was such an amazing day.
It's a great achievement and a great outlook on running a team and a competition as well. And you,
Mm.
in that as a manager, a big part of that success and building the team up. What does your role as a manager involve?
So in the very beginning, like, I call myself a team manager now, I was very much just a patient advocate in a role, trying to get other patients to come and play football. To be called a team manager for the British Transplant Games was an absolute honour. Obviously, it does involve a lot of work to get the team together and make sure that the team is able to be there and represent. And as a team manager now, I'm very much just about being a representative of the team. We are very fortunate now that we actually have an actual coach, a professional coach for the boys. So it means that actually we're able to help the boys progress to where they want to be in the team. So I do very much feel like I take a step back now and just ensure that the boys are happy, they're fit, and they're well to be able to compete.
And were you always involved in football and with teams growing up as well, maybe as a manager or a coach at some point in your life?
So no, never as a manager, as a coach. I've always enjoyed playing the sport, even as a kid, I absolutely loved it. I played for my local team for about 4 years. And again, that was amazing, because being able to do that as a patient, is not the easiest of things to do. You feel that you've got to try and push yourself a little bit harder than probably what your friends did, to make sure that you're able to make the team, and also that you're physically fit to be able to do that, alongside having the chronic illness. But no, so I've never had the opportunity until I've been looking after this Welsh team. So again, that in itself is huge, to go from just being a player to now be in a situation where I'm trying to help support lads, achieve whatever goal it may be, if they're to continue into football, whether they would even consider doing things like coaching themselves, and maybe be in a situation where they can help coach the team in the future.
We'll touch more on you playing football when you were younger later on in the podcast, which is another remarkable achievement considering when you had your first transplant. Please stick around to hear more about that. I asked the same question to Jo from the England and Wales Transplant Cricket Club when she was on the podcast. What are the aims of the Wales Transplant Football Team?
For me, the aims of the Wales football team is to be there as a consistency. What I want for the team is to achieve, obviously, win trophies, provide every opportunity to play any type of game that is possible. But I'd like it to leave a legacy moving forward, that, what they start now will provide the opportunity for other younger patients that may be struggling, may be feeling that they're unable to compete, like I said in the beginning. And that actually what it does is it's laying down the grassroots so that actually for future people who just want to play and have that opportunity, we'll make sure that we're able to continue providing it for them.
That's a great aim and a great attitude for you to have, and to have such an impact on the players that are playing is credit to you. We've
Thank
touched
you.
on the COVID situation earlier on
Mm.
with that short gap between the team playing in Newport and the pandemic hitting. How has COVID affected the team? And I know, like with the Transplant cricket team I'm involved with, how important has the team been to each other throughout the pandemic?
Oh, oh, it's been absolutely massive. I know that you kind of set up the social media groups, once these things sort of develop, and the lads have been constantly talking to one another, supporting one another through it all. Obviously, really chomping at the bit to get back into training, and obviously after the Newport games have been so successful, they really wanted to hit the ground running and continue that success. So it has been really, really hard over the 18 months, nearly 2 years now, to have not been able to have that opportunity. And I think with chronic illness in itself, it kind of you get to situations where you can become institutionalized, where you feel that you're stuck because you're incapable of doing things that others are doing due to falling unwell or not feeling that you are capable at the point in time because you're just going through so many different things, or you might be having regular medical treatment. So obviously, when the pandemic hit, I think it created a larger pressure, and it made people or patients certainly realize even more just how restrictive life is. But to then be able to, when the pandemic hit and it said you literally cannot do anything because being chronically ill and being immunosuppressed, you are such a high risk. It was almost like a prison sentence. And I think in some ways it still feels like that for many, because where people were so desperate to get out and couldn't put up with it anymore, it was becoming such a stress to be able to not to do anything and almost have your hands tied. When they started to take the restrictions away and allowed people to go back out, people then became stuck and scared and frightened of, well, after I've been in so long, how safe am I going to be going back into the open world? So there's
Yeah.
been such mixed emotions, I think, with the pandemic, that in some ways people are really, really badly still suffering. And I think they're unable now to get themselves out of their own bubbles that they put themselves in. Then on the other hand, and the football team is a perfect example, I think because they've had that camaraderie through social media and regular check-ins and supporting one another, you've got the other side of things. So they're coming out fighting, they're ready to get back on the pitch, they're ready to get back into their normal lives. And realistically, that's what they want. And actually, one comment has been made recently, obviously due to the fact that, we've still got to try and keep the lads safe as much as possible. And it's a perfect comment, I think, for chronic illness in itself, is that, we have to live. We have a life to live and we
Yeah.
have to live it. So even with the pandemic, we have to learn to live with it. And we're so used to being restricted in so many ways that patients have learned to live with that. So this is kind of just another kind of cut on the post, I suppose. Whereas it's just another situation that they have to learn to live with, and they're ready to do that.
It was very strange trying to do some sort of reintegration back into life, whether that be seeing family in the garden, going back to
Mm,
playing some sort of sport, or even going further back, going out for a walk for the first time after shielding.
yeah, huge.
Have you been able to get back to training? And if you have, what was it like to start again and be close to people?
Do you know what? For me personally, I was very much like the lads. I was very keen to get the football training back together, and I was really looking forward to just being with the lads again and having that opportunity to have that bond that you just can't have over social media. I think we've all gone through that process of surviving through video calls and sending regular messages, but it's not the same as having a face-to-face conversation with someone and seeing someone in the flesh. You can really understand people's emotions a lot more when you're with someone than what you can through a screen. I think we all can certainly say that we know everyone has found it hard having to do things that way, but you can actually get a real idea of how someone is coping by actually standing or sitting in front of someone, and being able to have a real conversation and feeling that emotion in everything that you're talking about.
And being back at training, have the team been able to regain some fitness again and start running around? And have
Yes,
there been
yeah.
any rusty touches?
Oh yeah, there certainly has been some rusty ones, which is completely understandable after 18 months. It's like having to get back on a bike or something like that if you haven't done it for so long. So yeah, but actually, do you know what? It just came naturally. I think that's also helped with the coach that we've got, John Murphy. He's absolutely phenomenal. He was the missing piece of the puzzle in when we started the training, and myself and Sean Thomas, we were doing things that within our ability that we thought were going to help progression in regards to learning new skills and improving fitness. But we certainly did not have the skill and the talent and the ability that we now have in a coach. He can literally see the abilities of the boys. He can see where the things that they need to improve on, techniques they need to work on, and things like that. So that really has just helped massively. And what it does is it engages with the boys instantly, because they actually know in their mindset that the training that they're having is exactly if they were training for a local side. So they've now got the mental ability and understanding to actually realize that they are now in a situation where they can push themselves to the limit and know that if there isn't something quite right or they need to work on, then they've got a coach that is going to be able to get them to where they want to go.
And for those who aren't fully aware of transplant football, or people who want to get involved with transplant football in some way, like myself, who just inquired about joining a transplant football team when
Ah.
it starts up again, what are the adaptations, if there are any, in transplant football matches at the games?
So actually, at the games, everyone has to do a fitness test, which is obviously understandable. But that's about it, really. As long as you are well in yourself and you feel physically capable and able of playing, then you can play. It's very much the standard, like playing for any normal team. And I don't like saying a normal team, because do you know what? The transplant team is just as normal as any other league team,
Yeah.
in my opinion. The only difference is the fact that, some people have had a transplant, or some people are having medical treatment of some sort. But actually, when you're on the pitch, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference from General Joe Blogs to a patient like myself playing.
Does anyone wear any sort of protection over where their new organ is? I mean, particularly in our case with the kidneys being in a different
Mhm.
position to where they normally
Yes.
are, and not
Yeah.
having any sort of real natural protection around them. Does anyone wear any extra padding or some sort of protection?
So actually, no, we don't have anyone in our team. But I do know when we played in like local tournaments to do with transplant, that I have known of some patients that have worn like a protective thing around their waist. But they're few and far between. And I mean, like myself and other patients that are on our team, we've got some patients that have got access in their chest for the dialysis treatment. And I play with the lads, and it's no problem, and regularly, actually, I even play in goal. So I think what probably what happens is I think that because you're playing with other patients, there's an understanding there of just needing to be wary. So I think naturally patients are just cautious.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to, I think it was the first episode of this podcast back in December. I spoke to Stephen Harrison, who plays football as well for the Liverpool transplant team, and saying that he would, or a lot of the players, run around with almost their forearm over the kidney in case
Right.
they need to
Really?
block it or
Okay.
get in. Basically, just put in your organ first, thinking, "I'll just handle that."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think that that is kind of it's just a natural instinct, isn't it? And I think even with people like myself with the chest, my chest line, and we've got some patients that have got fistulas as well as access for dialysis. That I think, yeah, I think people do exactly that. I think when they're looking to go into tackles and things, I think you kind of naturally position yourself in a way that the rest of your body creates a shield.
Yeah, and when I eventually get back into football, which will hopefully be this summer, I'll be wearing the Hero Key Kidney Shield, which goes around the
Right.
lower abdomen. I won a competition set up by Hero Key and the World Transplant Games Federation, so they very kindly sent me that as a winner. Um, it's for anyone who's not seen it. I th- there's probably a link on the Transplants Take on Sport Instagram to my review of it somewhere. It's like an elasticated belt, like you get with the back support, with there's some padding over the kidney that's when it gets hit, it hardens on impact to just give you that. For
Wow.
me, it's mainly been a confidence booster to get back at my main sport is cricket for fielding, bowling, just so that if the ball does bounce up, you've
Ouch.
got the
Yeah.
confidence to get behind it. Thankfully, I've never, touch wood, never been hit over the years in that area. But if anyone would like a Hero Key Kidney Shield, if you go onto their website, which will be linked in the show notes, you can use the code Thanks Lewis 050521, and that will get you $20 off your purchase. So if that's something you're after, go and have a look. And while we're on the topic of sporting equipment that I may be able to help you with a discount with, if anyone's playing cricket or wants any clothes for the gym or a bag to go to the gym, I recently bought a holdall from them. If you go to neoncricket.co.uk and use the code LewisD25, you'll get 25% off your whole order. So I know it's a football themed podcast, but if anyone plays cricket, play cricket as well, please check them out. I can highly recommend it. Back onto the Wales Transplant Football Team.
Mhm.
What's sort of the next competition you're aiming for, the next place to go?
So we're hoping to obviously set up some games pretty soon. I think again, just due to the pandemic, it can't happen quick enough, unfortunately. But I say that at the same time, we've only been back training now a couple of months, so we need to be leaving it a fair while, just so that the boys have the opportunity to regain their fitness, get back into the training itself. That takes time for the boys to get back up to the levels that they were. So I think what we'll look to do is we'll look to set up some kind of friendlies with some other transplant teams across England and Wales, whether that be home here with us or whether we go away. But that's something it's later in the pipeline. I think at the moment for us, we just want to focus on the lads having the opportunity to come together, get back into the training, keep them as safe as we possibly can while things are still a bit up in the air and still a bit uncertain. And it also then just provides the opportunity to be with other people other than themselves in the house. So it's just giving them the opportunity to have a bit of social at the moment when still things seem a bit up in the air.
And how can people find the team online or get involved? Is that something they can do? Can new players join all the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have actually got on my Twitter and I have got on my Facebook. So if you look for Shaun Ruck on Facebook, you will find me. I have done some posts and it's actually got our poster on there. It explains that we train the first of the month and the third Sunday of the month. So it's twice a month we train, couple of hours. If anyone is interested, whether that be a transplant, and this could be any transplant. We would love to get some different transplanted players on our team. At the moment, it's pretty much 99% kidney and 1% liver, which is phenomenal in itself. But yeah, anyone that is out there listening, really keen to join us. We actually got a training this Sunday, 10 till 12 at Pencoed College. If you're listening to this and the podcast gets out on time, that'd be fab.
It'll be for us, for the purposes of us. It will be a week on Tuesday. Off the top of my
Okay,
head, I'm not
that's
sure what
not too
date that'll
bad.
be.
That's fine. Well, we'll be doing one on the third of the month anyway, every third Sunday as well. So there's always plenty of opportunities to come, and please feel free to get in contact if you want more details about the actual training itself.
So please go and have a look at that. And before we come on to your transplant story and your journey with kidney problems, which has been throughout a large part of your life, what would
Yes.
you say is your greatest sporting achievement or proudest moment with the Wales Transplant Football Team?
So the proudest moment with the Wales Transplant team is without a doubt taking them to the games in itself. Just that moment was huge for myself again and for the other team managers. We never thought that we would be able to take not just a football team, but to be able to take so many patients to the game and for it to be such a success overall. But it was without a doubt, it was that they're able to get to the final, and we came second, first or second in that situation, going to the transplant games, never really competed majorly before, was a huge thing. It was a huge thing for me to see these lads have that opportunity. To think if I was ever in their shoes at that age or the ages that they are, and to have been given that opportunity to have that chance at competing in a football team for your country, for the British Transplant Games, I would have been in absolute awe. So to be able to just watch it and see the success and the joy and all the positivity that it gave them in that moment to get to that point was amazing. Do you know what? I almost felt like a proud father in many ways just to see them achieve that.
Representing your country at any level, I mean, transplant patients, I've said this a few times on here, getting to the point of representing your country after having a transplant is, in bizarre circumstances, achieving a childhood dream.
Absolutely. Who would not want to represent their country in any sorts or in anything? To be able to say that I'm here to represent the country where I was born, that I grew up in, that I love so much, and I'm going to be showing them how amazing this country is of where I'm from. Yeah, absolutely massive.
I know I said we were going to come on to your transplant story, but while we're here, um, I actually tweeted out on Instagram, Facebook, asking for some listener questions, and we've got a few for you.
Okay.
If anyone is interested in getting their questions in for a chance to feature on future podcasts, if you follow Transplants Take on Sport on Instagram and Facebook at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter at TTOS Pod, there'll be a post that goes out the day before each episode is recorded, and you can send any questions, whether that be through commenting, DM, the little question box on Instagram, whatever it may be. If you send them in, there's a chance to feature on the podcast. The first one comes from whoever runs the Transplant Wales Football Instagram page, and it says, "How much does he love his captain?"
Oh, how cheeky is that? So that's Owen Shakespeare. So that is a transplant patient, liver transplant patient. So actually, like I said before, it was him that reached out to myself and Shaun. Obviously, I love him to bits. He is such a great guy. He is, I would actually say, he is almost the center of the team. The relationship that he has with all of the boys. I know that the boys could ever talk to him about anything. And he really brings the team together. He's helped to create and mold what we've got now. Everything that we have succeeded with up until this point, and everything that we've been able to create for the football team is absolutely just as much down to Owain as it is to myself and to Shaun.
The next question comes in from, it's a couple of questions from Darren. He says, "I'm going to try the pronunciation of the team in Welsh. Uh,
Go on.
who is Sean's favourite player for Trawsblaniad Cymru, and how many tournaments and
Oh,
trophies can the team win?"
Who is my favorite player? Well, that's just not possible. Do you know what? I love all of the boys for various different reasons, because they all bring something different to the team, to the friendship, to the brotherhood that is Team Trawsblaniad Cymru. So I can't put just one person down for that, I'm afraid, Darren. But I do love you all dearly, and you are all absolute superstars in my opinion. And what can we achieve? Absolutely everything. Everything that we set our minds to mentally, physically, we are going to be able to bring home so many different trophies, so many different medals, compete at so many different levels. And I believe that every single one of the team members will be able to see that success as well.
And hopefully they do. And the final question comes in from Fez, and it's probably more for before you got a coach in with the team. Uh,
Okay.
as you're now managing, you've got a coach in. Do you play Football Manager, and does it help with tactics?
So actually, I try and stay out of the main game. I'd rather the boys have the opportunity to be on the field and have that chance. But actually, no. Do you know what? I try not to be the team manager on the field. If I do play, I try and get into the mindset like the other lads. To just represent, be one of the boys, and try and achieve everything that everybody else is. It's only when I'm off the field and kind of helping with the coaching and trying to push the boys to through their best abilities is the only time I really put on that TM head, I think.
Is the coach into playing Football Manager on his computer or iPad? Does he use it for any tactics?
No, do you know what? I haven't played team manager since I was in my teens. And to be honest, even when I played it then, I found it so frustrating. I had to stick with FIFA. I was always about being the player and just being on the field.
I'm the same. It took too long with Football Manager.
Absolutely. You sit there just watching it calculate outcomes, and you think, why am I doing this when I could actually just be playing the games myself?
We'll move on to your kidney transplants now. I say transplants plural.
Yeah.
Your first one was actually at a very young age.
Mm.
If anyone heard that noise, that was my plug socket falling off. Uh, when did your kidney problems first start?
So I was actually born with kidney dysplasia. So my kidneys never actually formed properly. But it wasn't until I think I was about 6 or 7 weeks old that it was picked up. My mother was constantly trying to tell the doctors that there was something not quite right with me. She'll probably even say that but for different reasons. Something wasn't quite right. I wasn't well. I wasn't taking my feeds and things like that. And it was actually written in my mother's notes that she was an erratic mother. But through time, they did tests on me, and then they found that my kidneys hadn't formed properly.
How aware would you have been? I'm going to give away the age you had your transplant here. Your transplant was at 6.
Yeah.
Under that age, how aware were you of the problems?
Oh, very, very little. I think even probably from the moment that my parents found out I had kidney problems, the mindset that my parents have, and I think that's why it's instilled in me, is that I'm no different to anyone else. So they made sure that they provided me with any opportunity that allowed me to be normal in brackets. So growing up, I didn't really have any idea. Obviously, I would go for regular checkups to Great Ormond Street, but I didn't really think anything of it other than the fact that I had to have a checkup. That's all it. That's all it ever was. So yeah, I was completely oblivious.
So, with the kidneys not forming properly, were you on dialysis before the age of 6 then?
No, do you know what? I was so fortunate. With all the checkups that I had, everything was okay. My kidneys were constantly deteriorating from the moment of birth up until I had the transplant, and I was something like 4 to 6 months away from possibly having to go on to dialysis, and someone was looking down on me somewhere that I didn't have to go through that as a child, and I'm very thankful for that. Yeah, I had my transplant before I needed to actually have dialysis treatment.
Like mine, I was so grateful to avoid it just because of it's still. I know we've said normal a lot throughout the podcast. But it's audio
Mm,
only. We've both been putting our fingers in the air and moving them around because we don't really like saying
no.
normal. but there was a bit more of freedom without
Yes,
dialysis.
absolutely. Absolutely. It meant that, I had a social life as a kid. You would go out and you would play, and I had no restrictions to that, which was absolutely fantastic. So yeah, it certainly meant that when I was growing up from being a baby to the age of 6, I was able to build relationships and be a child as a child, I suppose, should normally be.
Once you'd had the transplant, how did you find living with it as a child? And I've asked a few people this before, being at school with it.
Yeah, okay. So again, actually, do you know what? I think I was really lucky to have the upbringing that I did. I think what it did was I wasn't put in this bubble of protection. So that meant that I was able to do things that other people were doing. And through that experience, it meant that I never had to say that I was a patient. I never had to say that I was any different to my best friend, my other friends. I was just a child being a child. And I think that's where I was really fortunate, because that meant then that I never had to see myself as anything different. And that's obviously then helped instill that mentality up until the age that I am now.
You can see it. That's gone right the way through with how you live in life as you
Yeah,
are.
absolutely.
And I suppose leading on from that, as you were not seen as any different,
Mm,
and sport being a big part of your life. You've said how much you like playing football growing up.
yeah.
Were you just playing completely regularly football as any other kid would?
Yeah, that's it. I played for my local team, where I lived back in Basingstoke, where I was born. So yeah, and I absolutely loved that. And I got to say, one of the benefits from having the transplant was obviously the fact that you were on quite high medication back then, high steroids and things. So I certainly had the ability that I was built like a brick house, and I was almost fast as Usain Bolt as a kid. So that really helped impact with sport. I think it certainly helped in some positive ways. It had a positive impact rather than having a negative impact hugely.
Bit like a Dharma Traore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? And I was like a whippet. I wish I. Do you know what? I wish I had that speed now, and unfortunately, I don't. And any of the boys in the football team will absolutely tell you that I don't. But yeah, that was huge. So I think that's why then I also loved sport, because I was so physically able and physically capable that I was able to enjoy sports and get into all types of sports. I think the only thing that I really never really enjoyed, and I certainly don't do now, is anything like to do with athletics massively. It's the sort of thing I wouldn't put myself into, unless I suppose I was doing it for a particular reason.
More of a team sport player.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm always about playing as a team. I think that's where you get the buzz in sports,
Oh yeah.
because you're able to feed off one another. You're always pushing one another to be the best that they possibly can, and even in those situations where actually you're not succeeding, it's your teammates that pull you through and keep you saying, hold your head high. We can still keep going. Don't drop your head. Just keep pushing forward. We got this. Come on, keep focused. And that I think that's where you get the joy of sport, or I know I certainly do.
People may know, listening to this, kidneys or all transplanted organs don't last forever. Yours, unfortunately, did fail still in your childhood,
Yeah.
still very, very young.
Hmm.
Was that just a natural cause, natural decline, as they would do?
Do you know what? I wish it was a natural decline. Unfortunately it wasn't. It went from I was having appointments at the time, I think every 3 to 4 months. So obviously every 3 to 4 months you have your check-in, see how things are doing, blah blah blah. And the next time that I went for the appointment, obviously because I was in school at the time and these were my GCSE years, I would go to the hospital, have my bloods, and then they would call with the results. And I remember my father come into the school. I was in the middle of a lesson, and he had to pull me out. And basically, my results had just gone boom. Rejection had hit massively, uh, and that was it. That was game over for my first transplant. And like you said, they don't last forever. Which is obviously it's unfortunate. It's just another treatment, like having dialysis. It's not a cure. There is not a cure. But I was very fortunate that even when I lost that transplant, I had 10 really good years of almost no major interruptions. You have your blips here and there, and your odd surgeries that you got to have, and treatments, blood transfusions, so on and so forth. I've never been the sort of person that kind of counts how many operations or procedures I've had, because actually that's not the focus that I want to have. I have it, get it done, and move forward. So yeah, it was a very difficult time when my first transplant failed. Very, very difficult.
So did that go from absolutely fine to crashing?
Absolutely,
Oh,
and the obviously the difficulty was, which many people would probably say themselves, is that actually when that rejection happens, you don't necessarily feel any symptoms of that.
yeah.
So obviously, I was in school, absolutely fine. I was actually in my drama class, rehearsing for my GCSE project, working with my friend. So it was the two of us working on this project, and basically I was pulled. And so not only did that impact on me, obviously having to deal with such a traumatic thing, but that also meant that I'd left, a friend and a classmate in the lurch for their GCSEs. Not good at all.
How did you then deal with the kidney failing and moving towards another transplant? At that point, did you go on dialysis?
Yes. Basically, I obviously then had to look at starting dialysis, and the only dialysis knowledge that I had at the time was being in Great Ormond Street and seeing young children on hemodialysis. And then back then, it was the big Baxter machines, the big blue machines. And you'd see these teeny tiny children, plugged up to looking poorly, really poorly. So, because that was the only knowledge that I had, I was very scared, really frightened.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do it. I would have quite happily have done anything else other than go on dialysis. But obviously, through conversations with the pediatric unit, they explained that things aren't exactly the same now. You've actually got some options. You can have dialysis at home. So that was the savior. So I went on to APD to start, because that meant that I didn't have the things of having to have needles 3 times or 4 times a week. It meant that I could have dialysis overnight while I slept. So it also meant that I could continue with school. I could try and continue to be a young adult and try and experience all those opportunities that you do as a teenager. Um, but unfortunately, that didn't work. We kind of trialed it for about 6 months, but it never worked. I then actually got a really bad infection in the line, so it had to come out, and then I had to start hemo. So for a short period of time, while I was still on pediatrics, I had to go to Cardiff UHW for that, and then I transferred to adults. And when I went to the adult unit and saw what their hemodialysis was like, it was a completely different ballpark situation, because obviously in pediatric, you have that situation of being kept in a very nice, pretty bubble. You've got major flexibility. It's a lovely place to be. There was only 2 dialysis machines in the pediatric unit, so there was only ever myself and someone else. And you had a lot of home comforts. You had consoles and things that could keep you entertained. Well, you then take that to an adult unit, which is a unit which is for patients that obviously have to have regular hemo, but it also had patients that were poorly as well that were admitted in Cardiff UHW. So you had a real mixture of patients, and it was almost like the feeling I remember is it almost felt like I was walking into a herd of cattle being kind of plumbed up and being milked. It was terrible, terrible, terrible experience, and I didn't like it at all. However, it was a situation that was thrust upon me, and I had no other options. But again, I was really lucky that during that time of me being transferred from pediatrics to adults, they were just rolling out home hemodialysis. So I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. is this an option? Can I do it? And I, again, so lucky and so thankful to my parents that they said, yeah, we'll do it. Whatever needs to be done. They learned the machine. They learned to put me on the machine. They learned to needle me, which is huge for any
Definitely.
parent, having to medically look after your son, but also to have to put, these 16 gauge inch needles into your child 3 to 4 times a week to keep them well. That's a massive ask, massive ask. So then, yeah, I did that. And in total, I did dialysis for just over 4 years before I had my second call.
How did it feel to get the call for the second one?
uh, um, Strange, surreal. I don't think you can actually put it into words when it happens, because when you get the call, it's always at completely crazy times, like either the middle of the night or early hours of the morning. So you're taken by surprise. And when I had this call, I think I'd already had two previous. So in my mind, I went to hospital thinking that it just wasn't going to happen. I remember sitting in the waiting room while we were waiting to start the process. Was it going to happen? Was it not? Had the bloods to check that everything was okay, and sat there waiting for hours and just thinking I'll be going home. And then they said, no, it's a match. We're going to go ahead with it. And even in that process, it's like an out of body experience. I didn't feel like I was there. I was just watching myself go through the process, and I wasn't nervous. I wasn't upset. I wasn't worried. They took me down to theatre, and it just happened. It happened almost as if it was a regular thing for me to do. I just can't explain it. It's really strange.
It's so quick as well. And mine was a live donor. I didn't have that experience of the call, but you've got time to build up and prepare for it.
Yeah.
For you, going bang straight in.
Yeah.
How do you prepare yourself mentally for something that major to happen?
I think mentally you prepare for it differently. I think it's dependent at how old you are and what your experience of kidney disease is, because I think all of these factors kind of entwine into the way that you work a way to cope with it. Because I think if I was to go, if I was to have a call now for a third kidney, I know that I would be in a completely different mindset compared to what I was for the first one, being 6 years old, not really having a clue. Second one, having a complete full understanding of what a transplant meant, but I was almost oblivious to what was going on because I think I was just in so much shock. But this time I have a much mature understanding of, one, more what that gift means to me, to have that third chance of having a gift of life, but also know what life it will give back to me. I don't think I fully took advantage or even was fully aware of how lucky I was with both of my transplants. I think I lived in a world where I didn't acknowledge my condition fully and just thought that my kidneys would always last. I'm just a normal person now. It's going to be no problem. Live the rest of my life, mapping out your future
Yeah.
in teenage years, what it is that you want to be, what you want to do, and what sort of life you're going to live. And I never really looked at myself as having a condition. And the only times I think reality strikes is when you're in that situation where things go wrong.
Oh yeah. It's a big reality check once something major happens like that, whether that be your native kidneys failing or a transplanted kidney
Mm,
failing or any major health condition or even so many things. For anyone wondering if they heard any background noises there, as we said at the start, Shaun is recording from the dialysis unit. So there was someone behind him there, so that's what the noises were. You mentioned in there you're now waiting for another one. So
mm.
unfortunately, your second transplant also failed.
Yes.
How do you pick yourself back up from that happening again?
Slowly, basically. Slowly. When it failed, I took that very, very, very hard. Um, I had a fiance at the time, two children, and again, it was a situation of I was putting my condition to the side and probably was not the focus that it should have been because my focus was my partner and my two children. So again, I was going to clinic, having my bloods done, and then going to work. And the day that that day that I went for clinic appointment, I was outside my children's school waiting to pick them up because I was able to finish early and whatever. And I had a phone call, and they said your results again are through the roof. We need you to come in. We need to investigate what's going on. And stupid me said, "Well, I can't. I'm picking up my kids." Because that was my focus. Again, I wasn't really acknowledging, I suppose, what was being said to me because my focus was, well, that's going to have to wait. I'll come when I'm available. When realistically, I should have gone straight there. But whether yourself, when you're so focused on trying to again live that normal life, um, that becomes your focus, and you don't want your condition to get in the way. However, if you don't make your condition as much a focus as the life that you're trying to live, then that's when really traumatic things can happen. And like myself, land in the situation that I did, lost my transplant. So I'd had that. It was I had it 9.5 years when it was failing. They did try and save it. They did try and stop it from rejecting anymore and try and stabilize it. However, it just didn't work. And they said that you'll probably get about another 6 months out of your kidney before you're at a stage where you need to go back on dialysis. And I remember saying over the 9.5 years that I would never want to go back on dialysis. It wasn't a life that I enjoyed. It wasn't a life that was a positive experience, unfortunately. As much as my parents tried to provide me still with a very stable and flexible life, it's the fact that I knew that I was different, and that massively impacted on me mentally and made that I was very, very socially distant, and I had become very institutionalized for those kind of 4 years. Really, I didn't do very much socially, and that's a big part of my life that you miss out on. Your teenage years is the years where you start to think about who you're going to be, and you find yourself as a person, and you do all the things that you shouldn't do as a teenager and all of that sort of thing. And I didn't get any of that, so that had impacted on me. So yeah, it was very, very difficult. So it did last 6 months. When I say that it lasted another 6 months, I was crawling. I couldn't get up the top of the stairs without breaking, and needing to literally lie on the floor to catch my breath back. It was terrible. So I then started hemodialysis. That was my first choice straight away because so again, the mentality that I was in this situation was I I have a partner, I have two children, and we're a family. So for me, moving forward, I needed to have a separation of my treatment and be able to come home and be a partner and be a father. So that's why I made the decision to dialyse in my local dialysis unit in Llantrisant, which is 5 minutes down the road for me. So on my 30th birthday was when I had my first hemodialysis session, and I've been doing that now just over 5 years.
Happy birth! What a birthday present.
Absolutely.
Are you using the fistula and needle then, or are you on the neckline this time?
So I'm on a chest line this time. I have had fistula in the past, and I was self needling and doing complete self care in the unit, but unfortunately it clotted, and they were unable to salvage it. So I've been back on the chest line now for best part of 2 years.
The hope is for another transplant, isn't it?
Absolutely. For me, that is. what I feel provides the best opportunities and the more flexibility. Although I know some amazing people that have been dialyzing pretty much all their life, and they do amazing on it, huge successes and coping with it really well. I think probably because I've had more life transplanted than dialysis, I think I would just like to go back to being in that situation again.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed, a third one does happen for me. However, unfortunately, I am in a situation where transplanting for a third time, it's a bit more difficult for my situation just because I've got so many antibodies now that I pretty much fight against anything that it wants to come in contact with. So I know that dialysis is going to still be quite a long period of time for me, but at the same time, I'm in a comfortable position where I'm able to manage my treatment successfully, be able to hold down a phenomenal job that I absolutely love, and I'm still be able to enjoy the family time that I have.
I said it earlier, but what a great outlook you've got on attitude and a mindset going through everything you've been through since your whole life. It's very, very up and down, isn't it? You got the high of a
Absolutely.
transplant
Yeah.
failed. You're still able to do some football, aren't you, at the moment?
Yes.
Which is
Yeah.
great
So,
to hear.
absolutely. Being part of the transplant team is something that I love. I mean, like, I'm not physically as fit as some of the other lads on the team, and you see me kind of dip in and out of the training, needing to take a knee and catch my breath back. But I love that opportunity of being able to, like I said before, to be involved with the camaraderie and to feel like I am one of the lads, and just enjoy that experience of being part of a football team again.
I was meant to ask this when you mentioned the third transplant and the chances of that, just because I'm curious too, third transplants, as somebody who had one, the first one quite young. Um, if the third one does come,
Yeah.
what are we right in thinking have you got two in the front now?
Yes. Yeah.
Would the third one replace one of those?
So when my second transplant failed, they instantly looked at, I had ultrasounds to see what that kidney was like, and then obviously look at the other side of me to see what the first kidney was like. Well, that one has completely dissolved pretty much. There's
Right.
not much there. So if I do have a third transplant, it will go in the position of where my first one went.
Okay. So that's almost completely gone then, the first one.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 'Cause obviously, it failed when I was, got to think now, I was 15 going on 16. So actually, that was 20 plus years ago now.
It's a long, yeah. Going forward, transplant or dialysis, what would you say your goals are? Let's say sporting wise, it's a sports themed podcast.
Oh, okay. So I think goal wise is to definitely take the transplant team to the British Transplant Games again, which is in Leeds next year, and to win. We came second, so we're not going to accept anything other than first now. And I can definitely say that all of the boys will have that mentality.
Hopefully you're successful at the next games. Shaun, what a pleasure to talk to you. I've certainly learnt a lot from your attitude and mindset and the way you've dealt with so many ups and downs and setbacks. One more thing before we go, and as I say on each podcast, it's the question that I ask everyone. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone facing a transplant?
I think someone who's facing a transplant, to communicate with other patients, to seek advice and support from others that are in your situation. It can be a very scary time, and I certainly know myself and from supporting other patients that you can isolate yourself quite a bit because you think you're the only one that's going through it. Whereas actually, if you speak to others that have been through it or have been through similar situations, it can really put your mind at ease, because what you're able to do in that moment is you're able to empathize with someone, because you can talk to family members and you can talk to friends about what you're going through, but you do hit a barrier in these conversations because there is unfortunately, through nobody's fault, a lack of understanding of what it is that you're either about to go through or actually what you're having to mentally cope with. So that would definitely be my number one advice. Speak to other patients.
I completely agree with you and found that use myself. And I'm sure you're a real role model to the rest of the Wales Transplant Football Team.
I'd like to think so. I hope so. Whether they would say that I am, because I know that certainly sometimes I can be a bit of a ball breaker. I think sometimes in training, and it's through no fault. I think sometimes what it is I can see what I can see in them is I can see myself, and I just want to help them achieve everything that they possibly can. And you know what? I've already been seeing that already. And like I've said before, I couldn't be any prouder of them. You know, they are all absolute superstars in their own right. And to have gone on the journeys that they all have, and also different to mine, some even a lot worse than what I have, but to still turn up, 2 Sundays a month and be on that field and give it their all. I take my hat off to them. I think they're absolutely super.
Absolutely. There we go. Shaun, thank you for coming on. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you're liking what you're hearing, please make sure you tell your friends, family, anyone to help spread the word, whether that's telling people or sharing the post on social media, sharing the pages round. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it would mean a huge amount to me if you could rate the podcast 5 stars on the show page. And if you leave a review as well with your 5-star review, I'll read those out at the end of the podcast. And it really does help to allow more people to discover this and bring more people in to listen and hopefully learn from the inspiring guests that I chat to each week, every other week now. Thank you once again to my guest today, Shaun Ruck. I've been Lewis Daniels, and you've been listening to Transplants Take on Sport.